What really bothers me is Frankie Boyle's attempt to make British people feel ashamed of Britain's involvement in the slave trade. That really gets my goat, because Britain's involvement in the slave trade is one of the most proud accomplishments of British history. And I know what you're thinking, oh my goodness, slavery is bad. And that's correct. Which is why the British ended it. For everyone. If we just take a cursory look at the subject,
did they really
see how it is not nearly as cut and dried as Frankie makes it out to be.
It too.
Even the very word slave comes from Slav, because of the sheer number of Slavs taken as slaves by conquering peoples. But Frankie is trying to drum up white guilt. So let's talk about African slavery. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to start exploring the West African coast, and they did indeed capture African natives to be brought back to Portugal as items of curiosity. Europeans who travelled to Western Africa discovered that Western Africa had civilizations of its own. For example,
bro, imagine how funny it is. You've never seen a black person or a white person ever. You look, I think it's a ghost. If I saw a white person, like all I know is black, brown. I've never seen like a light person. I'd be like, oh, it's a ghost. I saw this little animation. It's anime. So this guy, he was black, and he found himself in Japan, and those guys, they're trying to wash him. They're like, he's dirty, but that's his skin color. They're like so surprised. They're trying to wash him. They're like, maybe he fell in a pool of mud and it's stuck. But that's how it looks like. So I get that. If I was in their position, I'd definitely capture a lot of white people and say,
Dutch visitor to Benin City wrote in around 1600, as you enter it, the town appears very great. You go into a great broad street, not paved, which seems to be 7 or 8 times broader than the warmost street in Amsterdam. The houses in this town stand in good order, one close and even with the other, as the houses in Holland stand.
What's this about?
More than a century earlier, Benin exchanged ambassadors with Portugal. The Portuguese did take a few Africans back to Europe, but they didn't need to set up operations because they discovered that there were already thriving slave trades in Africa. And so they bought slaves from African rulers and traders. The vast majority of slaves taken out of Africa was sold by African rulers, traders, and military aristocracy who grew wealthy from the business. Most slaves were acquired through wars or by kidnapping. And before you start thinking that this is excessively barbaric, this was the standard for almost every civilized society all across the world. For example, in ancient Greece, Strabo tells us that the island of Delos trafficked in 10,000 slaves a day.
Oh, this isn't the only place. Egypt had slaves, like biblically talking. They enslaved Hebrews, and it was like huge, really, really big. It's crazy. And so yeah, definitely slavery's been there forever. It's just crazy. And there's no really, I think it's just pretty bad, because some people are like, oh, these guys were just servants, but then it's so deep. I'll tell you more about this one at the,
even
in the
before
videos,
the Roman Empire, even when we're coming to the end of the Roman Republic in the 1st century BC, it's estimated that a third of Italy was made up of slaves. Slaves made up of people whom the Romans had conquered and taken back to Italy to do hard labour. And so to anyone even slightly educated on the subject, it is absolutely unsurprising to find that, for example, in 1510, the capital of the Empire of Songhai was teeming with slaves. Slave trading in West Africa.
Bro, what's his name?
But it was different to
Genghis
what
Khan.
you expect. It wasn't for commercial purposes. Definitely. It was to show status and to give the wealthy African elite a comfortable life. And with the appearance of
Would I have
Europeans
slaves
desperate
if
to
I
buy
was
slaves
rich?
for use in the Americas,
Most
the
likely.
character of African slave ownership changed. Indeed it did. The character of slavery on the west coast of Africa changed to look a lot more like the character of slavery on the east coast of Africa, because we're going to talk about the Arab slave trade, specifically the circumstance of Swahili-speaking peoples. Unsurprisingly, the Arabs, being far closer to sub-Saharan Africa than the Europeans, had been taking advantage of it for far longer. They were a people with as much commercial nous as anyone else.
Hey, stop right there. What the heck? I speak Swahili. These guys are talking about me. The ruling class of coastal Swahili society, sultans, blah blah blah. Muslim slaves used non-Muslim slaves as domestic servants to work on farms and estates. This is literally what happened in Egypt too. That's not really surprising. So none of this surprises me. It's just like
the ruling class
relearning
of
what I've
coastal
already
Swahili
seen.
society, sultans, government officials, and wealthy merchants used non-Muslim slaves as domestic servants and to work on farms and estates. And they even had plantations, such as the Omani Sultan Said, who became immensely rich when he started up clove plantations in the 1820s with slave labour. Arab Muslims settled along the coast and intermixed with the locals, forming a people and culture known as Swahili, which started in around the 10th century AD. So unsurprisingly,
That's
the
a
East
language.
Africa slave trade was well established long before Europeans arrived on the scene and was driven by demands for labour by the sultanates of the Middle East. You might be
what's
thinking,
this
well,
context
that's
to have to
interesting.
do
If
with
the
me?
Arabs had been in Africa for about 1,000 years, taking sub-Saharan African slaves, why isn't there a very large population of black people in Arabia? And the answer to that is that the Arabs used to castrate them, cock and balls entirely, a practice that
That sounded funny. Man, I'd be so mad if someone had to cut my balls. Let's see. The Arab slave trade typically dealt in the scale of castrated male slaves. Black boys between age 8 and 12 had their scrotums and penises completely. Oh, yo, that's so harsh, bro. Oh, they cut your. Oh no, I don't want mine cut off. Oh, that hurts. I feel bad for them. Okay, castration. That's one big no-no. No boy should be denied of a penis. You know, that's so funny. Why was that funny? But this is sad. This is bad. Oh, the Arabs, man, that was evil. You're basically a girl once they do that. Once they cut your penis and no balls.